The Glint Summit is a great opportunity to connect to people who I can relate to about the changing world of work and the place that employee engagement has in it.
The summit is totally different from other experiences because of the atmosphere. We are not unknown, like in a big conference, and you're sitting with other hundreds of people.
I'm meeting people with a lot of passion and a lot of real interest in the topic of people science and of employee experience.
And to see the different perspectives, to see new ideas, to see different challenges that people are having in their organizations is really valuable for me.
I always had heard that Pixar was like lightning in a bottle, and I feel like it's not just a Pixar. You really can create this environment and try to find that playfulness in your work area.
One of the highlights so far has been the storytelling session we had from Pixar, which was just incredible, and to bring the story of engagement to life.
I have learned a lot about the challenges that other people have and also the solutions that they use to succeed with the implementation. And I think we will use it in practice.
This feels very inclusive. It feels like it's very much for us and about us, and makes you feel that you're not alone in the challenges that you're facing as well.
It's really focused on building us as a community. There's a genuine intent to help us with our colleague experiences, and I've been very impressed with the Glint team and the venue team as well. It's been a marvellous experience.
It's a great experience. I would invite everybody to come to the next summit.
Yeah, I love this topic, I love talking about it, I love working in this area. So it's really great to be with people who share that same passion.
I would love to come back. I know that I will continue to learn, and I will be connecting with my community after.
Hello and welcome to the 4th Annual People Success Summit. We are so excited to welcome you all to our first ever global summit, and the first to be held completely virtually. I'm Katie Farrow, the head of storytelling at Glint, and I will be your host, your MC, and your virtual Sherpa for the next couple of days as we listen, learn, and come together to build the new world of work. As I'm trying to get across in the photo here, the summit looks and feels a bit different from years past. Odds are you're in a setting that looks a lot different from what you've come to think of as work. Many of you today will probably be interrupted by your kids, your partners, maybe your roommates, and a handful of you are lucky enough to have a furry friend to cheer you on and provide emotional support as you stretch your brain in the days to come. Yet, through all the differences that we're all experiencing right now, our mission at Glint and at the People Success Summit remains the same: to put our heads and our hearts together to help all of our people be happier and more successful at work. That's the work we at Glint do every day, and the fact that you're here with us tells me that that's the journey you're all committed to as well. When we started the People Summit Success 4 years ago, we aimed to create something that was intimate, something that was interactive for the most passionate, the most invested, and the most forward-thinking members of our community. We met in a small meeting space in Sonoma, California, probably about 50 of us, for some serious discussion about employee engagement and some serious connecting. This year, we're in an intimate community of over 1,000 strong, with representatives from around the world. It says a lot about the adoption of people-centric approaches and the support that you're all seeing for what you're most passionate about, just like us. You're all here to build on your approaches to what we call people success. People success is bringing your best self to work in order to do your best work. It's an approach that's people-centric, holistic, and agile, and it's rapidly gaining steam as organizations look to create more people-driven, inclusive, and flexible workplaces. People success allows organizations to be nimble, to create more meaningful support for their people, and to make timely, targeted changes to respond to the ever-changing environment. People success is an essential foundation to creating an organization that thrives, especially when, as we are all too familiar with, the going gets super rough. You know that people success could not be more relevant than it is today. With millions of employees working remotely around the world, with safety and mental health at risk for the majority of our employees, no matter where they are, what they're doing, and an ever-present undercurrent of uncertainty, having this foundation in place to help your people be their best and do their best work is most organizations' top priorities. In the past 7 months, since COVID-19 was declared a global pandemic, we've heard from dozens of HR leaders and millions of employees through their confidential employee surveys, and we've learned a lot about how employees are feeling right now. At the very beginning of the pandemic, engagement and its related drivers seemed to actually tick up, and there are a number of reasons for that. But since the beginning of the summer, almost every factor driving employees' happiness has been trending down. No drop has been more pronounced than the connection driver. It's no surprise that employees around the world are feeling isolated and feel disconnected from one another. 31% feel less connected to their managers since before the onset of the pandemic. And even more, 37% feel less connected to their teammates. At the same time, we've seen a shift in the elements that employees say are the most important to their happiness. And one of those most significant shifts has been in the area of belonging. Although feeling that you belong has always been in the top 5 drivers for employee happiness across Glint's customers, its impact has increased by 12% over the last 7 months, which demonstrates that we're all looking for ways to feel like we belong, even in areas that we're not super familiar with. Meanwhile, burnout risk has risen nearly unabated since COVID reached a global scale, which is no surprise to anyone on this call. Employees are being asked to do so much more in certain conditions, all while finding the lines between home and work to be blurred at best, and in many cases, non-existent. But through it all, gratitude has remained an unrelenting theme. Even as they express their anxieties, concerns, frustrations, and sometimes their sadness, employees are also sharing how it feels to be a part of an organization that cares deeply about their well-being. Not only are they sharing helpful, timely information their leaders can use to improve the workplace, whatever it might look like, they're also saying, "Thank you for asking." And our customers are definitely asking. It's been incredible to see the change in the way organizations ask for feedback since the onset of the pandemic. Across Glint customers, the average number of pulses has gone from a pre-pandemic 3 per year to an inspiring 7 per year. The employee voice is swiftly becoming the blueprint for the way organizations are managing right now, and likely how they will in the months and the years to come, which gets me really excited. What's more, our customers and our extended community are leaning into the wisdom of their peers as we all look for ways to understand, how can I help my employees the best right now? Since the onset of the pandemic, membership in our Glint community has increased by 48%. Even more encouraging is our active participation, which has grown by 2.5 times since March of this year. We've also seen rapid adoption of the People Success Forum, which is a LinkedIn group we created earlier this year to connect HR leaders during the crisis, which has grown to more than 2,500 members of this community and counting. This tells me that we're all looking for support. And that's because since March, We've all been grappling with what feels like this sliding scale of responding, recovering, and reimagining our worlds of work and going back to the beginning again. We've come together often to hear from our customers and from our community the many changes they've been making in response to and because of this pandemic. We all know that this has become a time for organizations to take stock of the many ways they engage their customers, shareholders, and employees and make changes they've always wanted to make, but haven't had the time, urgency, or support until now. We're seeing organizations lean into the concept of people-centric, holistic, agile people programs in ways that they thought were years away and hours of change management involved in that process. And they're doing it overnight. They're empowering their managers, giving them access to regular information about their people and the resources and support they need to have regular, meaningful conversations with their employees. They're simplifying their approaches to people success, streamlining engagement, learning, and performance processes, and aligning them with the rhythm of their business in ways that they've never been able to do before. They're working learning into the flow of work, enabling managers with personalized, just-in-time opportunities to improve their effectiveness in formats that help them put those skills into practice right away. They're designing agile performance approaches that over-index not on rankings and ratings, but on a sense of purpose and the opportunity to develop and grow for both employees and their managers. They're enabling ongoing feedback and recognition that helps employees at every level, including leaders, make timely adjustments to continually get better, improve their skills, and become more impactful. All of these changes have the impact of making people programs both more effective and more manageable for people like you. These shifts in behavior have demonstrated to employees, managers, and leaders alike that they're heard, supported, and valued. This week, you'll hear from a dozen of your peers about how they've shifted their strategies over the past several months and years to come closer to achieving people success. Not only will you hear about their philosophies and their strategies, but you'll also be inspired by really concrete examples of change that you can emulate at your organization starting tomorrow, as well as some very important best practices and lessons learned. And of course, they won't be the only ones sharing stories and sharing best practices. They'll be looking to learn from all of you. The summit will, as always, be conducted in a conversation-first, interactive format that encourages questions and discussion along the way. Your questions are absolutely encouraged. There's a Q&A box on the right of your screen to drop your questions in for our speakers at any time. And you can upvote questions there to make sure that the ones that you really want to get answered are the ones that are getting answered. We'll also be providing additional resources throughout the day in the resources tab of the Attendee Hub, which is up if you look up. And please join the water cooler talk sessions today and tomorrow for the opportunity to network with your peers and reflect on what you've been learning throughout the day. And throughout the day, any questions that you have can be directed to glint-summit@linkedin.com. To continue the conversation during the day and after the summit, we encourage you to join us in the People Success Forum, that LinkedIn group that I mentioned earlier, that is going to unite you with all of the people here, as well as other people success leaders who are looking to build the new world of work. You'll find resources, ideas, and support from your whole community. So here's what to expect this week. We're going to have 4 main sessions today and tomorrow, with a handful of region-specific workshops in geo-appropriate time zones led by our people science consultants and our local customers in that region. Tuesday and Wednesday will run from 8 a.m. Pacific to 12:45 p.m. Pacific, and Thursday will be a little bit shorter with several breakout sessions, including our Americas and our Europe workshops, a breakout specifically for Glint customers, and breakout sessions specifically focused on the topics you told us in registration were most important or interesting to you. You can find which sessions you're registered for in your personalized agenda in the Attendee Hub. Today, we'll jump right into things with a keynote from the Chief People Officer of Electronic Arts, also known as EA, Mala Singh, followed by interactive sessions on creating a people-centric plan and driving alignment, 2 key elements of people's success. And we'll have time to network, recharge, and discuss in that water cooler talk program, followed by an introduction to increasing the effectiveness of your programs through storytelling. We'll meet right back here tomorrow to learn about effectively implementing change and measuring and expanding on progress, kicked off by our fireside chat from LinkedIn's own Chief People Officer, Twila Hansen. Finally, throughout these next couple of days, please don't be shy. This is a community event. We all are asking you to participate. Ask questions, make challenges and suggestions, share your stories where you can, and make sure you're connecting with your peers on LinkedIn and in the People Success Forum. We're all in this together, so please stay present, stay invested, and we'll build the world of work together. So without further ado, I am honored to be the one to introduce you to our very first speaker, Mala Singh, the Chief People Officer of Electronic Arts, who will talk about her experience leading a global brand through turbulent times. Take it away, Mala.
Thank you, Katie. Good morning, everyone, and good evening to our colleagues that are joining from Europe. I'm excited to spend this time with you today and talk about leadership through turbulence. And what you'll see in my talk is that the turbulence for electronic arts and for interactive entertainment as an industry started a couple of years ago. So my conversation is about the turbulence we were driving through even before COVID hit. And then I'll talk with you a little bit about how we've been able to navigate through the events of this past year. So let's go to the next slide. And what I would like to share with you is a little bit about games as an industry. So when you think about interactive entertainment and gaming specifically, it's an industry that's grown from a pastime to a true lifestyle. Many individuals haven't fully grasped how big this industry actually has become, maybe more so now that we've all been kind of stuck at home. It's been a welcomed source of entertainment for a lot of people and a welcomed way for people to connect. To share a little bit more about the industry itself, the next slide just talks a little bit about some of the statistics that govern our industry. So specifically, games, this industry generates more revenue than television, movies, and music combined. About 1 in 3 people in the world play games. They spend an average of about 7 hours, 7 minutes per week. And they watch other people play games more than they watch broadcast sports. And so the magnitude of this and the engagement that players have with the content produced in the industry is really staggering. On the right, you'll see some statistics about the United States. The size of the industry is about 43 billion. And if you move to the next slide, we talk about the growth in the industry is pretty dramatic across the world. 10 years ago, there were roughly 200 million people who played games. Today, that number is close to 2.6 billion, approaching 3 billion. And a lot of that was unlocked through things like smartphones and other mobile devices that came on the market a few years ago. So this is an incredibly vibrant industry. And a few years ago, we had embarked on a journey as Electronic Arts going through what we anticipated to be the most disruptive period for interactive entertainment in its entire 45-year history. And that disruption was caused by a number of different factors. Specifically, on the next slide, we talk about shifts in everything from the business model to the product delivery model to platform delivery innovation, as well as consumer engagement. And let me tell you a little bit more about this. So in terms of business model, typically people used to go to Walmart or Best Buy or Tesco or Carrefour, and you would buy the shiny disc in a box and you'd bring it home and you'd play it in your Xbox or your PlayStation console from Microsoft and Sony. The model has now shifted to not necessarily paying that $60 or $70 price point, but free to play. This was a dramatic change that happened in the industry. And so today, consumers want premium games that they might pay $60 or $70 for, and they also want free experiences with live services where they can choose to consume and pay for the experiences that they want. And that business model has fundamentally shifted how gaming companies are making games. In terms of product delivery model, again, it used to go to a retailer. Today, vast majority of games at Electronic Arts are downloaded directly into people's consoles, completely bypassing the need to go to a store and to interact with a salesperson or to see a visual display. It's a fundamental change in how we're delivering to our customers. And that is wholly dependent on technology and improvements and ways that people can download games very quickly. There's not a lot of patience with our gamers when it's time to play their favorite game, to wait for a download. There's also been significant innovations in platform delivery. So for example, some huge players like Google are now creating game streaming services where you no longer require a console. You literally have a controller and a smart TV and a plug-in device, and you can play games. And the reason that that is important is it's a huge technological advancement. If you think about Netflix, from a technology perspective, that's what we call linear media. Netflix pushes out content to its viewers. Interactive media means you're pushing out content and receiving content back from your players, and it has to be instantaneous with no lag. That is a massive, massive technological advancement, and it will fundamentally shift how people play and bring lots more consumers in. And then lastly, what's also shifted is consumer engagement. People, when they have games that they love and enjoy, it's not just about the gaming experience, it's about the social connections that they make with friends. And what we noticed, massive player engagement this year, where people unable to connect physically with each other do so through this virtual world. My now 13-year-old, the strongest connection he's had with his friends this year is playing a game called Apex Legends every day after school for like an hour and a half. And it's as though it's been the important strand that connects their relationship and their friendship. And he hasn't lost anything in terms of what he feels is close friendships with his people. So games have really fundamentally shifted. And so we were already embarking on, as a company, how we respond to these turbulent shifts in the industry. And the first thing that we needed to think about, in addition to how the industry was changing, is the next slide, which is really the labor and talent market shifts. And I know many of you are experiencing this as well. The next generation of workers have very different perspectives about how they engage with their employers. There are lots of demands for new skills as a result of how our company is evolving. And so in addition to the significant disruption that was happening in the industry, there's also disruption happening in the labor market. And we can talk about some of the demands from talent on the next slide, where really, when you think about EA particularly, we shifted to a majority millennial company about 4 years ago. And now we have Generation Z coming in. And what we hear from those workers through Glint, right? So having deep insights from them about their expectations of their employee experience is that the company is purpose-driven and socially conscious. And this was a year that really required us to demonstrate our values and social consciousness and respond to all of the interesting things happening around the world. Diversity and inclusion has to be a clear and present priority. It's not okay for it just to be words. It has to be action. And they remind us of that every single day and expect that from us as a company and from leadership. Mental health needs to be top of mind for leaders. This, again, had already emerged. The world had become a much more stressful place. This year just made it even more difficult. Workforce flexibility, again, even pre-pandemic, we saw lots and lots of demand for more flexible ways of working in terms of both geography, time, et cetera. And we were already exploring how we became more flexible so that we could continue to attract and grow and develop the talent we needed to power our business. Rescaling also becomes really critical. So like many other industries, automation and sophistication in computing technology was eliminating some jobs. Here's an example. It used to take an artist about 3 weeks to create an environment, like a landscape within a game, okay? We now have rendering technology that can literally have an artist kind of in a minute or two draw the kind of shape of a landscape that they want and input a couple of things, and it will render that landscape in minutes. So we went from 3 weeks to minutes. And so these fundamental shifts in technology and automation are also challenging us to reskill our workforce for the next generation skill sets. So as a people function, on the next slide, we talked about, all right, the industry is shifting, the company is shifting, has to shift to respond to these industry changes. And we have workforce volatility. So we embarked on an important piece of work a few years ago to create a talent strategy informed by this new and innovative business strategy. Much of what we do as a people function is connecting that business strategy to talent. And so we were no different as a company. We started that work. And the next slide shares, a high-level view of what our talent strategy was, which was basically focused on 3 very important pillars. The first was, again, this is all pre-pandemic, scaling leadership to be able to navigate change and complexity that we were anticipating in the industry, focusing in on people managers who are the linchpin to everything. I say to our people managers all the time, you have the most important job in the company, and it is an honor and privilege to do what you do. And so we've invested quite a great deal in skilling our people managers to lead our teams effectively through this sea change that we're experiencing as an industry. We also had to adapt our organization, meaning specifically segment our workforce, recognize that some skills were more valuable than others, and we had to work harder because all of a sudden we're not just competing with gaming companies, we're competing with every next generation technology and entertainment company. And if we wanted data scientists, we're going to have to compete with Google and Apple and Facebook and every next generation company. And so we had to adapt in a lot of our practices to make sure that we could hire and retain the critical skill sets we needed for the company's future. We also heard from our very young workforce that the number one thing that they desired, non-monetary, was the ability to move around in meaningful ways and grow their skills through mobility. And mobility means different teams, different business units, different geographies. And we had not done enough to power that. And oh, by the way, I believe the best way to build skills is through diverse experiences. And so we started creating our own internal talent marketplace to allow for more movement and mobility. We invested in workforce planning and location strategy, thinking about the various geographies in the world. Today, we operate in 25 countries, and we did a comprehensive analysis to identify which markets in the world had concentrations of the skills that we would need for the future. And then lastly, cultural evolution. So 2 big pieces here, work around diversity and inclusion. Again, those 2.6 billion people who play games, they cut across every demographic you can think of. They're about 45% female, which might surprise you. I think a lot of people have in their mind that gamers are 18 to 25-year-old men who hang out in a basement and play on a console with their buddies. No, lots and lots of women play games. Our players, our customers range from age 8 to 80. They're every geography, every ethnicity, incredibly diverse. So there is a compelling business case for Electronic Arts to be a diverse company that represents its player base. And then lastly, we knew that we had to up the game on accountability and performance. And so we've been investing in a great deal in driving clarity of goals and expectations, continuous feedback, rewards that are differentiated and tied to delivery of results. And in order to facilitate all of this, we also had to transform as a people function. And so we embarked on what we called our own HR transformation work, and it was specifically focused on a couple of things. We defined an employee value proposition and thought through the journey that people go through with us, everything from join to contribute to grow to departure. And we even talked about departure. EA has one of the highest rehire rates of any company I've ever worked with. About 15% of our hires last year were people who chose to return to EA. I'm one of those boomerangs as well. So we thought through our employee journey and value proposition and started to focus on all our practices and how they delivered against that. We restructured the function to enable both strategic business unit focus and people-centered geography focus. Our business partners are focused on delivering the business strategy every day through talent strategy. What we call our people partners, they're focused on delivering an amazing employee experience every day through frontline partnership with people managers and frontline support of employees. We invested in strengthening our core capabilities, so things like data and analytics, talent strategy development, strategic workforce planning. These were all next generation skill sets for the team. We spent a lot of time evolving our tools and technology to get us to a place where we could power self-service in a more effective way, and that access to information and collaboration could feel seamless and effective. We warmed the tone of communication between EA and its workers. So many of our policies were written with this sort of parental tone and this underlying assumption that we think you're going to do the wrong thing, so we're going to tell you all the guidelines and requirements so that you don't do the wrong thing, versus we trust you, we support you, here's some information that will help you as you think about our workplace. And then lastly and finally, when a lot of this work was complete, we rebranded the HR function from human resources and facilities to people experience. And it was the culmination. So massive amount of work happening. And then this happened, this next thing. So we were already going through turbulence and disruption. And then early this year, again, because we're a global company, we're in 25 countries, Fortunately, and I know it's hard to say fortunately about anything related to this pandemic, but fortunately, we have offices in Asia. We saw this early. We were able to test our practices to helping people work from home in places like Shanghai. And then as the pandemic rolled across the world, we were able to adapt those practices. We had enough time. And then by early March, we sent the entire company of 14,000 workers at EA to work from home. So probably much like many of you listening in today. And as we entered this process, there were sort of three phases in how we looked at our management of this pandemic and navigating the turbulence. The first was respond with urgency. Keep our people safe. We sent people home earlier than many other organizations did. We continue to enhance our technology on a site-by-site basis to make sure that it was as frictionless as possible. One of the things we had to do early on was identify a single source of truth. There was so much misinformation out there about the pandemic. And so we had to make a choice as a company of who were we going to follow. And it was the World Health Organization, Johns Hopkins, and Harvard's Institute of Global Health. And so that was important because our people trusted us to help them navigate the information about the pandemic. I started writing to the company on a weekly basis, just touching base on where we are, what's going on. I still do, and I probably will forever now because people have come to look forward for our Friday emails that talk about just where we are in the world and what's going on and what they should anticipate. And we opened a lot of new lines of communication, lots of dialogue between our employees and our leadership so that we could have timely decision-making, allow for ongoing connection with our people, especially as we were all distributed. Those were the early days. Then in the next phase, we moved to a place of what we call Stay Home, Play Together. And Stay Home, Play Together was a campaign we ran with our players as sort of a public service campaign to support people staying at home. Because at the end of the day, we were trying to encourage the WHO guideline as well and encouraging people in lockdown not to go out. But from an employee perspective, what we realized is we need to meet people where they are and provide resources to our teams to enable them to adjust to new ways of working and the very real personal challenges. We had already invested in mental health, really strong and effective mental health support before the pandemic started. And I honestly don't know how we would have managed this without having a really strong partner there. Our utilization in mental health services went from about 6% prior to pandemic to about 24% today. And so that shows you the dramatic needs that people have to navigate through the difficulties and challenges in their world. We mobilized to reimagine our future. So we formed a group called Project Proteus. At EA, we love giving project names to things. The more creative, the better. Proteus, for those of you who love Greek mythology, is the god of sea change. He's the shapeshifter. And that kind of reinforced for us what had to happen here. We have to shapeshift as a company and adjust to this new way of being. And so we have an incredible cross-functional team whose role is to manage through the three phases of the pandemic. Phase one, crisis management. Phase two, live with it, right? And phase three, the pandemic is resolved and we have a new future that is different than perhaps the future we had been part of. And then lastly, what was important with this was listening with empathy and communicating with honesty. Really spending time anticipating what people's questions and needs were going to be and getting ahead of those. It's really important when you're leading through turbulent times to have deep and open communications with your workforce and not just wait for them to ask you for what they need, but be constantly sensing so that you can actually anticipate those needs and meet them and be honest and open with them in updating about our path forward. We were very honest about the fact that this was going to be a marathon and not a sprint. And I remember the day that I explained to people that we're going to be like this for a while, it was kind of reality settling in for folks. And that was hard, but it built a huge amount of trust between our workers and leadership within the company. And I commented a little bit about this idea of continuous listening, right? It was really important for us. We have an always on, what we call our always on coronavirus survey. And it's an opportunity to give people any day of the week the opportunity to just step in and tell us what's going on for them. We modify the questions sometimes, we ask different kinds of questions, and it gives the Proteus team insights about our design for the future. We've also been doing internal focus groups and monitoring publicly available external platforms for things like sentiment. We are at a record high level of engagement. I can't believe that through this difficult experience that we have been in, we are at a record high level of engagement in the company. And even though productivity is not at 100% because people are schooling kids and dealing with isolation and all of the challenges that come with this, we shipped 8 games this year, which is huge. Other companies have shipped 1 or 2. And so I'm incredibly proud of what we've been able to accomplish. We also have very real-time feedback mechanisms. Like I said, a small frictionless survey that just gives us the opportunity to get real-time, quick feedback about the things that we're exploring. All right. So what I would say is the most important learning through this is you got to ask, you have to listen, and you have to act. And on the slide, I talk about the next slide, I talk about some of the few things that we've done. Things like homes not being equipped effectively. So offering things like stipends or ergonomic support, giving everybody an opportunity to work with an ergonomic consultant to make sure they set up their home working space in a way that's physically healthy for them. For parents, the majority of whom are women, we've been very concerned about this awful statistic of women leaving the workforce. And again, gaming historically has not had a lot of women in the industry. We're paying really close attention to this. Through our employee resource group we call Women's Ultimate Team, we're talking directly with women about what their challenges are and looking for ways that we can bring solutions like alternative work arrangements. We've created something called the Pandemic Care Leave for anybody who's a caregiver so that they can take time away and do what they need to do. We've created Slack channels at each location and geography, which is for caregiver support, so employees can form community and help each other through some of the challenges that they have. I talked a little bit about mental health. Employees were struggling emotionally. We brought a lot of those resources to bear, and we've had group sessions as a company so people can connect with each other and talk about their experiences. And lastly, many were craving factual information. There's a lot of misinformation out there. So we brought in a couple of medical consultants, and we have employees ask whatever questions they have about the medical and the science related with the pandemic. And our medical consultants jump in the Slack and answer people's questions. And so I think that's been a really welcome tool for our employees. So where do we go from here? Well, I would have never imagined that we'd be living the life that we're living. And EA, here's an important thing to understand. EA was not a virtual company before the pandemic. Less than 5% of our workforce worked from home in any capacity. I'm talking a day a week or fully from home. Post-pandemic will be a lot higher than that, 5%, but we're not going to be a virtual first or a remote first company. What we do is really unique and really special. The creative process, the magic that happens when people are in each other's physical presence and can gather around a monitor to look at a piece of concept art or stand up around a whiteboard and sketch out the next great level of a game design. Those things are meaningful and important, and the creative process benefits from collaboration and physical proximity. So we have a lot of desire for flexibility among our workforce, which is great. And we have deep insights into who we are as a company and what it takes to create the magic in our games. And so today, what we're focused on is embracing all of the learning. So again, deeply understand the longer term needs of our people, critically assess what's working well for us and what's not, so that we can think deeply and thoughtfully about the future that we create and continuously test and learn. We have a lot of experiments going on right now across the company. We have taken this time to also reaffirm and reimagine who we are. Our values, our core values, have really been the foundation that's led us through this. We care deeply about our people. Their safety and well-being continues to be the top priority through all of this. And as we think about values like pioneering and creativity and passion that we embrace as a company, we're trying to reimagine our cultural identity in a world where our teams are going to be more distributed. How do we create that connection to our studios, for example? There's a strong studio identity and culture that produces great games. And we're just not assuming that, that'll just take care of itself in a new future where teams are distributed. So we are working through lots of new ways to cultivate creativity. And then again, we know we're going to have to embrace more flexibility. So new models, offering choice to current employees. Most of our people, what they want is a hybrid model. They want some days in the office, some days at home. And so we have our Proteus team really thinking through how might we make that happen? How do we have these conversations? And so we're embracing a lot of new ways of working that will maximize some of the great technology that's out there. And so the last thing I would say to you as an HR function, as a people function through this, is on my next slide: never waste a good crisis. And there are many things that we struggle to move on as a company before. We never thought we could operate the company with more distribution of talent. Well, guess what? We've learned a lot. We've had an opportunity to reaffirm our values and deepen our engagement with our people. We've had an opportunity as a people function to really step up and lead through this. And it's increased our value and impact within the company. So overall, while every difficult situation is painful like this year has been, it also presents gifts and opportunities to reimagine everything. And so we've had a really powerful year in terms of reimagining who Electronic Arts is and who we will be in a future world when the pandemic is resolved. So with that, thank you. And Katie and I will take your questions.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mala, for that great start to our program. I think you set a perfect tone for what we're all going to be talking about in the next couple of days to come. So we have gotten a fair number of questions, and unfortunately only about 5 minutes, so I'll ask 2 or 3.
Sure.
As a reminder, you can always upvote the questions that are there to make sure that the ones you want to get answered are answered. So without further ado, I will jump into the top one here. So we have, thanks for sharing this. I have 3 college-age boys, and all 3 are getting into gaming either through Twitch, YouTube, or other gaming apps. Life has moved to interacting online mostly. How does this technology affect future HR, engagement, DEI, etc.?
Yeah, so a couple of things I'll mention. So internally in the company, again, we do a lot of stuff online too, right? And what has really been surprising to us is when we do our global town halls, we used to broadcast from an auditorium that would fit about 400 people, and then, you know, maybe 1,000 or 2 would join online, and people sometimes would watch it later on. Now we have incredibly high engagement because the technology today has become the all-important equalizer, right? I say to people that everybody's got the same 2-inch by 3-inch box on my Zoom screen. And so one of the opportunities with the technology around DEI just internally is it does create a level playing field for everyone, and people who have not felt included or felt like they belonged all of a sudden do. In games in particular, EA has always stood on a platform around equality, particularly gender equality. We were one of the first companies to represent LGBTQ characters and their stories and narratives and authentic experiences in our games. And we've taken a lot of heat from that with certain groups. But we believe deeply in doing social good, and we recognize the awesome power that we have as a company that has the level of engagement we have. Even within EA alone, we have about 500 million people who just play EA games. And so we believe the authenticity of the characters, their stories and experiences, and how we express those in our games, like how many skin tones people can select when they create their avatar in The Sims, or African-American hairstyles for their avatars. We believe those things are really, really important. And we believe because our demographic that plays games is so young that we can help shape society's perspectives on these things.
Thanks, Mala. The next question, can you talk a little bit about your frictionless surveys?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things that we do. So we do engagement pulses twice a year, and we do manager surveys once a year so the people managers can get very specific feedback. The frictionless surveys, first of all, everybody's become accustomed to. We have very high participation rates in our surveys, like north of 85%. We usually have, I think last engagement survey, we had about 17,000 comments. I mean, very, very high participation. So people want to give us feedback and they want to dialogue. And I think that's because we take the feedback and we actually act on it. When you see low engagement in your survey, it's usually because there's a lack of belief that it's actually going to amount to anything. The frictionless survey, so we created around the coronavirus management, pandemic management, we created an intranet site for all of our employees that's kind of always on, where any information about how they help tap into resources or navigate through the pandemic is there. And we have our always on coronavirus survey. So anytime people pop in there, they have an opportunity within 3 minutes to give us really quick feedback about what's going on for them, right? What are they dealing with? What are the challenges? How are they feeling? Are they happy with our response? And because it lives where people are spending time to find resources and support for navigating the pandemic, that's what we mean by frictionless. Super easy. We try to make sure that any surveying and pulsing that we do is integrated in with our work processes and practices, so it doesn't feel like the side thing that they're asked to do.
Great, thanks. And for our last question, how do you approach strategic workforce planning? Has it worked? What has worked well for you it is critical, but often difficult to do well.
Yeah. So we're embarking on this journey, and the first thing we needed to do was really deeply understand the skill sets within the company. And today, I will tell you, there's not a great tool for this to really, not yet, that I've seen that really captures people's skill set. And the way we think about workforce planning is the right skills in the right team at the right time in the right geography, right? And so when you think about that, our teams, our business units and teams do deep reflection on our product development life cycles, what kinds of skill sets, how the world of work is evolving, how the world of game development is evolving, and they identify those skill sets. We then step back and we think through, okay, where are those skill sets in the world available to us? And we think through and really start to deeply hone in on things like flexible and location strategies, distributing development. It used to be that one studio would work on a game at a time. Now our studios tap into flexible resources all across the company. Strategic workforce planning is one of these holy grail kinds of things, right? It's not perfect, it's difficult, it's incredibly complex, there's not great tools. But I think it really starts off with really good dialogue about what your needs are and who your talent is. And so we've been deeply articulating things like job families and matrices that help us understand how people progress in their skill development. We look at compositions of skill sets across the different game teams and how those need to evolve based on how the work that they're doing is evolved. And then we couple it with analysis of availability of that kind of talent around the world and try to build plans over a 3-year period that get us to the place where we have, again, right skills in the right team at the right time in the right geographies.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Mala. Unfortunately, we have to end our Q&A right now. And sorry if we didn't get to your question. It's so great to see that so many are coming in. Again, if you have questions and want to connect, join our People Success Forum, which you can find in the links under the Resources tab. So thank you so much for joining us, Mala, and we will move on to our break.
Thank you.
And before we go into our break, I do want to share something really special with all of you. This week, we're going to learn a lot about the elements about people's success that can help make it a reality. Things like planning and creating alignment across your organization. But what makes these elements really come to life is something that's a little more difficult to define. That's the presence of people-driven leadership. People like Mala who are really taking the organization to the places that other organizations only dream about. So for the last couple of years, my team and I have been on a mission to uncover what it takes to actually be a people-driven leader by going straight to the source, interviewing those most inspiring leaders that we know, and taking notes. What we found, we've outlined in a project called People-Driven Leaders, which continues to this day. We're still looking for more people-driven leaders to learn from and to share those findings back with you. So today and tomorrow, I'd like to introduce you to two special leaders, Terilyn Monroe, the CHRO at Varian, and Joan Burke, the CHRO at DocuSign. They have this unique combination of qualities, experiences, and perspectives that have helped them make their respective organization into thriving examples of organizations that really embody people success. Our founder, our Glint's founder, Jim Barnett, sat down with each of them before the pandemic to find out what makes them tick, and we'll share that with you today. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce you all to Terilyn Monroe in this Inspiring Happiness People-Driven Leaders video.
And I'm really excited to be here today with Terilyn Monroe, who's the Chief People Officer at Varian. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me here.
So at Varian, you've built this incredibly mission-driven culture. Tell me a little bit about how that culture got created.
Varian's a pretty special place. It's a 70-year-old company. And our focus is creating a world without fear of cancer. But a few years ago, we realized we wanted to increase the quality of care for cancer patients around the world. And so we became very, very purpose-driven by putting our customers and our patients in the center of our strategy. But at the same time, we decided to look at our culture and be very intentional. So we established a new set of cultural beliefs, and we've woven those into everything that we do, from interviewing candidates to goal setting to giving feedback to reinforce what we're trying to do as a company, who we are, and what makes us special.
How did you get so passionate about the Varian mission yourself?
8 years ago, my mother found out that she had cancer. And she was so afraid when she found out that she didn't tell my dad, my sister, or me for a few months. And then when she finally did, she only had a couple months to live. And so when I think about Varian's vision, a world without fear of cancer, it connects with me emotionally because we're really wanting to help people like my mom not be so afraid and to know that there's treatments out there.
Wow, that's powerful. Thank you for sharing that. One of the things we've learned at Glint and LinkedIn is how important engagement is for driving those business results. What are some of the things that you've done to keep those engagement levels high?
I think our survey was a real defining moment for us. It helped us listen differently to employees. And it's really helping us think about things like how we act as one, how we engage now, how we also are able to inspire one another. We were able to, yes, look at the quantitative scores, but we were able to immediately see how people were feeling. And over the last 2 years, we've been seeing employee engagement scores on the rise. It really comes down to the fact that our employees are the ones who are really helping us drive innovation in the company. And they're the ones that we're really focused on first.
What are some of the key things that people are doing today to drive engagement that they weren't doing 5 years ago or 10 years ago?
Mm-hmm. What I love now is there's so much more of a focus on the employee experience. What keeps us engaged is being able to work on real meaningful things. Our lives are so complicated now, and everyone's trying to find that work-life flexibility. Every company is really going to have to be thinking about how do we meet employees where they are? How do we ensure at the same time that we're achieving our goals and objectives? I also think that there's more of a focus on inclusion and belonging, which I love.
Yeah.
Having inclusive environments where people feel like they belong, I think is a key part also of engagement and the experiences that people have.
Let's talk about you as a leader. How would you describe, or how would your team describe your leadership style?
My favorite word is inspire. I love to connect the dots and come up with a vision that's in service to what we're trying to solve for at the end of the day. What I would hope that people would say is that I'm an inspiring leader who's always driving for change and trying to make things better.
Can you tell me one thing you do to be happier at work?
Gratitude is important to me. I am fortunate to have been the first in my family to go to college, to graduate from college, and I'm first generation born here in the US on my dad's side.
Wow.
And I just have so much gratitude for what I'm doing, who I get to work with, where I work. And I look around every day and realize that it's the people that I get to work with that bring me so much joy.
Gratitude is a simple yet really powerful tool for finding happiness in life. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.